Grave of the Seventh Night, Candle. The moon that night was bleeding. Its crimson light spilled over the rooftops of Al-Madina Al-Qadama, painting the ancient walls in the color of old wounds. The wind howled through the narrow streets like a wounded animal, and somewhere far off, a dog barked. Once, twice, before falling silent, as if strangled by the darkness. Amina kept her head low as she walked, the hood of her shawl pulled tight. Every footstep echoed too loudly against the cobblestones, and yet, she wasn't sure if all the footsteps were hers. Shadows shifted in the corners of her eyes, slithering across the walls like living ink. The streets were empty, but she could feel it. She was being watched. Her uncle's house stood at the end of the lane, a crooked building that seemed to lean toward her, its windows like black, hungry eyes. Inside, the air was thick and sour. Candles burned low, their flames trembling as though afraid of something unseen. That night, her uncle was not alone. A man sat in the main room, Khalid, draped in rich robes, his eyes reflecting the candlelight like a predator's. His smile was slow, deliberate, and wrong, as though it had been learned rather than felt. Amina, her uncle said, Khalid is an honorable man. He has come to take you as his wife. The room seemed to close in. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. Khalid's gaze slid over her like a chain tightening around her throat. She bowed her head politely but said, I am grateful for the offer, but I cannot accept. Her uncle's hand slammed against the table. The candles flickered violently. You will do as I say, he growled. That night, she tried to sleep, but the house would not let her. The walls creaked in a way that sounded like breathing. The darkness pressed against her skin like cold fingers. Then came the whisper, low, close, almost inside her ear. They will harm you, unless you leave. Her eyes flew open. The room was empty, yet the air felt heavy, like something unseen was leaning over her. Who's there? She whispered. I am the one they betrayed. The one whose body rots beneath cursed soil. I can help you, but only if you help me. Her blood ran cold. What do you want? There is a grave beyond the old city walls. In it lies a truth they fear. Find it before they find you. By morning, her uncle had already set the wedding for the end of the week. Gold exchanged hands. Khalid's eyes followed her like a shadow that couldn't be escaped. That night, she couldn't breathe under the weight of the house, so she obeyed the whisper. Wrapped in a dark cloak, she slipped into the dead streets. The wind hissed through broken shutters, and somewhere, a door creaked open by itself. She didn't look. She couldn't. The graveyard lay beyond the crumbling city wall. The earth there smelled of rust and rain. She found the grave easily. The soil was disturbed, as if something had clawed its way out, or in. Kneeling, she brushed the dirt aside until her fingers struck something cold. A small wooden box, carved with symbols she didn't understand. That was when she felt it. Warm breath on the back of her neck. Slowly, she turned. A tall figure stood behind her, its face hidden under a hood, but two faintly glowing eyes burned from within the darkness. You've found it, the figure said, voice like wind through a tomb. Now you must choose, truth or life. The air around her seemed to freeze. Somewhere deep in her soul, she knew, whichever choice she made, there was no turning back. The glowing eyes did not blink. They seemed to pierce through her skin, through her heartbeat, through every secret she had ever buried. Amina clutched the wooden box tightly to her chest. Who are you? She asked, her voice trembling. The figure stepped closer. The smell of damp earth and something metallic, blood, old and dried, wrapped around her. A witness, it said. A victim. A curse. They called me a liar when I spoke the truth, so they buried me where no prayer could reach. A shiver crawled up her spine. And now, the hooded figure tilted its head slightly. Now I wait for someone brave enough to open what you hold. Her eyes flicked to the box. It felt heavier now, as though the thing inside was alive and listening. She swallowed. What's in it? The voice lowered, becoming almost a growl. Proof. Justice. Death. All in one. A sudden gust of wind slammed against her, and for a moment she felt fingers, cold, long, inhuman, brush against her hand. Open it, the figure said. She wanted to run. Every part of her screamed to drop the box and flee. But she remembered her mother's voice, reciting verses of Surah and Nisa, stand firmly for justice, even against yourselves. Slowly, she pulled at the latch. The box creaked open. Inside lay a folded piece of parchment, its edges blackened and brittle. A dark stain, too old to be anything but blood, spread across one corner. She unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was hurried, desperate. It told the story of a woman, the figure's sister, who had been promised justice but instead met betrayal. Khalid's name appeared more than once, along with her uncle's. They had stolen her inheritance, silenced her, and buried her alive. Amina's breath caught. She looked up, but the hooded figure was no longer there. The graveyard was empty, silent, except for the soft sound of the wind weaving between the tombstones. She hid the parchment in her cloak and hurried home, her heart pounding. But as she reached her street, she stopped dead. The front door to her uncle's house stood open. The candlelight inside flickered violently, as though someone, or something, was moving quickly through the rooms. When she stepped inside, the smell hit her first. Not the usual scent of smoke and stale bread, but something sharp, bitter, like burning metal. She called softly for her uncle, but no one answered. Then she heard it, from her own bedroom, the same whisper as before, now louder, angrier. He knows. He knows you went to the grave. He will take it from you. Her stomach turned. Khalid. Before she could react, a shadow passed across the hallway. Khalid stepped into view, smiling as if they were meeting at a wedding feast. Amina, he said softly, I think you and I need to talk, alone. The way he said alone felt like a blade against her skin. Khalid's footsteps were slow, deliberate, like a predator circling prey. The dim candlelight painted long shadows across the walls, stretching his silhouette into something monstrous. Amina took a step back, her hand instinctively moving toward the parchment hidden in her cloak. What do you want? She asked. He smiled without warmth. What I've always wanted. Control. And you, my dear, hold something that belongs to me. Her pulse quickened. It doesn't belong to you, she said firmly. It belongs to justice. Khalid's eyes darkened. Justice. His voice dripped with mockery. Justice is written by the ones who survive. And I have survived by burying those who threatened me. Before she could answer, a cold gust swept through the house, snuffing out half the candles. The air thickened, heavy with the same scent of damp earth she had smelled at the grave. Khalid froze. His eyes darted around. What is this? Then the whisper came again, only now it was everywhere. In the walls, the ceiling, the floor beneath their feet. Murderer, thief, betrayer. Amina's heart pounded. She wasn't imagining it. The voice was real, and it was angry. Khalid spun toward her, his calm mask cracking. What have you done? He demanded. But before she could speak, the hallway darkened as if a cloud had swallowed the candlelight. From that darkness, the hooded figure emerged, silent, unmoving, but its glowing eyes fixed directly on Khalid. Khalid stumbled back, his face pale. No, you're dead. The figure's voice was low, steady, and full of centuries of rage. And yet, here I stand, because your sins call me back. The room shook, the wooden beams groaning. Amina felt the floor beneath her feet tremble, but her fear was tangled with something else, a deep, unshakable resolve. This was the moment her mother's teachings had prepared her for, to speak the truth even when it burned her tongue. You buried her, Amina said, her voice rising. You and my uncle. You stole what was hers, and you silenced her. But you can't silence her forever. Khalid's breathing grew ragged. His gaze flicked between Amina and the figure as if calculating which was the greater danger. Then, in a flash, he lunged toward her. Before he could touch her, the hooded figure moved, faster than any human. It was suddenly between them, its hand pressed to Khalid's chest. A sound like cracking ice filled the air, and Khalid gasped, his eyes wide with terror. The figure leaned close, whispering something in a language Amina didn't know. Khalid screamed, not from pain, but from something deeper, as if the scream was being torn from his soul. Then the figure released him, and he collapsed to the floor, shaking. His eyes were unfocused, his skin pale as ash. The figure turned to Amina. The parchment is the key. Take it to the Imam before the 7th night, or his blood will stain your family for generations. The candles flickered back to life, and the figure was gone. Amina stood frozen, clutching the parchment, as Khalid's ragged breathing filled the silence. Khalid was still on the floor, trembling like a man who had glimpsed the edge of hell and realized it was waiting for him. His lips moved, but no sound came except a faint rasp. Amina's instincts screamed at her to run, yet something held her for one heartbeat longer, a deep, strange pity. Despite his cruelty, he was now nothing more than a frightened shell of himself. But the parchment in her cloak burned like a living thing against her side, reminding her why she could not stay. She turned toward the door, moving quickly, but Khalid's hand shot out and gripped her ankle. His eyes locked on hers, desperate and wild. "Don't take it," he croaked. "You don't understand. It's not just about gold. It's cursed." The word cursed sent a shiver through her, but she yanked free. "Then it belongs to God, not to you," she said, and slipped into the hallway. The house felt alive now, the walls whispering in low, overlapping voices, the floorboards groaning under her feet as if reluctant to let her pass. At the far end of the hall, the front door swayed open and closed by itself, though no wind touched her face. She stepped outside into the freezing night. The street was empty, silent, too silent. Even the wind had stopped, leaving the air heavy and unnatural. Then she heard it, soft footsteps following her. She turned. No one. Her breath clouded in the air, curling upward before dissolving into the darkness. She quickened her pace toward the old Imam's quarters on the other side of the market, but as she passed a deserted alley, a shape peeled itself from the shadows. It was a man, tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes as sharp as moonlight on steel. His cloak was dusted with sand, and a sword hung at his side. His voice was low, steady. "You shouldn't be out here alone." Amina hesitated, sensing no malice in him, only concern. "Who are you?" she asked cautiously. "Someone who's been watching," he replied. "I heard the whispers in your house. They weren't meant for mortal ears." She felt a flicker of hope, mixed with fear. "Do you believe in curses?" His gaze didn't waver. "I believe in justice, and in protecting those who seek it." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "If you're carrying what I think you are, then every step you take is being hunted, not just by men like Khalid, but by what they've awakened." Her heart thudded. "Then help me get to the Imam." He nodded. "Name's Zaid. And from now on, you don't walk alone." They moved together through the narrow streets, their footsteps quick and quiet. Somewhere behind them, something followed, its presence like a cold shadow crawling over their skin. By the time they reached the market square, the moon had dipped lower, and a strange mist was rising from the ground. Zaid's hand went to the hilt of his sword. From within the mist, a voice hissed Amina's name, stretched, distorted, like it was being spoken underwater. Shapes began to form in the fog, human-like but wrong, their limbs too long, their movements jerky, as though pulled by invisible strings. Zaid stepped in front of her, his sword drawn, the steel catching the moonlight. "Stay behind me," he said. The whispering grew louder, surrounding them. Amina clutched the parchment, feeling its edges cut into her palm. She knew one thing. If they didn't reach the Imam before the 7th night, she might not live to see another dawn. The fog thickened until the market square seemed to vanish. Stalls, walls, and streets faded into a pale nothingness. The only thing Amina could see clearly was Zaid, tall, steady, sword in hand, his silhouette sharp against the swirling mist. The whispering rose, becoming a chorus of voices, male, female, old, young, all speaking her name, stretching it until it barely sounded human. Triple Mai, Na. Shapes moved within the fog. They weren't just shadows, they had eyes, glowing faintly like coals buried in ash. One stepped closer, its face half-rotted, half-masked, as if it had been stitched together from memories. Zaid raised his sword, the blade singing softly as it cut the air. "Stay behind me," he repeated, his tone not sharp but protective. The creature lunged, impossibly fast. Zaid's sword flashed, slicing through the mist, but the thing didn't fall. Instead, it burst into a swarm of black, moth-like shapes that swirled around them, their wings whispering in words Amina didn't want to understand. She clutched the parchment tighter. The whisper from the grave, the hooded figure's voice, echoed in her mind. Before the 7th night. Her breath came quick and shallow. "Zaid, we have to move." He nodded, his eyes scanning the mist. "They're trying to hurt us. Keep your hand on my cloak and don't let go." They moved like that, slow but steady, the mist curling around them as if testing their strength. Every few steps, something would rush toward them, a flash of claws, the shadow of a face, the faint brush of cold fingers against Amina's cheek, but Zaid's blade kept them at bay. Finally, the fog thinned, revealing the cracked stone steps leading to the Imam's quarters. An old wooden door stood at the top, its surface carved with Quranic verses that seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight. As they approached, the mist pulled back, almost hissing, as if the words on the door burned it. Zaid knocked once, twice. The door opened just enough for an old man to peer out, the Imam, his eyes sharp despite his years. He took one look at Amina, then at the parchment in her hand, and without a word, pulled them inside. The moment the door closed, Amina felt the weight of the night lift slightly. The Imam led them into a small, candlelit room, the air filled with the scent of burning oud. "Child," the Imam said, his voice deep and steady, "do you know what you carry?" Amina hesitated. "A truth and a curse." The Imam nodded gravely. "Both are the same in this case. What you hold is not only proof of betrayal, it is the anchor that keeps a restless soul bound to this world. Release it wrongly, and the darkness will spread." Zaid shifted, his hand still resting on his sword. "Then what must be done?" The Imam's gaze moved between them. "On the 7th night, we must go to the grave. There, under the light of the full moon, justice will either be served, or the dead will not rest until all connected to the crime are gone." Amina's hands tightened around the parchment. She thought of her uncle. She thought of Khalid. She thought of the hooded figure's glowing eyes. And for the first time, she thought of Zaid, standing between her and danger without hesitation, and wondered if his path had crossed hers by chance, or by destiny. The Imam set the parchment on a low table, its blackened edges curling as if the very air around it burned. He began to recite verses softly, his voice steady, each word striking the room like drops of pure water falling into a poisoned well. Amina felt the hairs on her arms rise. As the recitation filled the air, the shadows in the corners of the room began to move, not away, but toward the parchment, as though drawn to it. Zaid stepped closer to her, his presence grounding her in the midst of the unease. "Whatever happens," he murmured, "stay behind me." The Imam's voice grew louder, the rhythm building, and for a moment, the shadows froze. Then a sharp crack echoed through the room. The window had splintered, though no stone or hand had touched it. Amina's breath caught. Through the broken glass, she saw them. The same long-limbed figures from the mist, standing just beyond the door, their heads tilted unnaturally, their glowing eyes fixed on the parchment. The Imam didn't stop. "They cannot cross while the verses are spoken," he said between breaths. "But their hunger will grow. On the seventh night, they will be strongest." Amina turned to Zaid. "You don't have to stay. This isn't your fight." He met her gaze, his eyes steady. "It became my fight the moment I saw you walk into the fog alone." Something stirred in her chest, not relief exactly, but a warmth she hadn't felt in years. She was about to speak when the candle flames in the room bent sideways, as though a great wind had blown through, yet the air remained still. The Imam looked to the door. "They're testing the threshold. You must rest now. Tomorrow we prepare." Amina lay on a thin mat in the small adjoining room. The walls here were lined with shelves of old books and scrolls. Zaid sat near the doorway, keeping watch, his sword across his knees. Sleep came slowly. In the darkness behind her eyes, she saw the hooded figure again, closer now, its eyes burning brighter than before. "You're closer," it said. "But the seventh night will demand a price." She woke with a start to find Zaid watching her, the first light of dawn creeping through the cracked window. "Bad dream?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "Not a dream. A warning." Outside, the city was waking, but the air carried an unnatural stillness. Somewhere in the distance, a single crow cawed, then fell silent mid-cry. It was the sixth day. Tomorrow night, the grave would either be a place of justice, or the gateway to something far worse. The seventh night arrived like a held breath, silent, heavy, waiting to be exhaled. The moon hung low and full, casting the world in a pale silver light. Amina stood beside Zaid at the gates of the old graveyard, the parchment wrapped in cloth and bound with twine, as the Imam had instructed. The Imam's voice was calm, but his eyes betrayed the weight of what was to come. "Remember," he said, "we are here for justice, not vengeance. The Quran commands us to stand firm for truth, even if it is against ourselves or those we love." Amina nodded, her heart pounding. Surah An-Nisa, she thought. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory, "Do not consume one another's wealth unjustly, and do not kill the soul which Allah has forbidden." They stepped into the graveyard. The air grew colder with every step, the earth beneath their feet damp and soft, as if freshly turned. Around them, the graves seemed to lean inward, their stones casting long, crooked shadows. Then came the first whisper, not from the grave they sought, but from all around. "Too late. Too late." Zaid's hand rested on his sword. "They're already here," he murmured. The Imam led them to a sunken patch of earth where the hooded figure had first appeared to Amina. The moonlight revealed the faint outline of a name on the weathered stone, a woman's name Amina knew well. Her chest tightened. "Mother," she whispered. The Imam knelt, opening the cloth and placing the parchment on the ground. Truth binds the soul, he said, but truth can also set it free. The ground trembled. Shadows poured from between the graves, forming the long-limbed figures that had haunted her. But this time, they didn't lunge. They circled, swaying like tall grass in a wind only they could feel. From their midst, the hooded figure emerged. Its voice was the same low, steady tone as before. "You have brought it. But will you give it?" Amina's throat tightened. "If I give it, will you rest?" The figure stepped closer, lowering its hood. For the first time, Amina saw the face. Pale, tired, beautiful, and so achingly familiar it felt like looking into a mirror. Her breath caught. "Mother." The figure's eyes softened. "My daughter. Justice is not for me alone. It is for the living, that they may walk free of the chains I carried." Behind her, the Imam began reciting verses again, his voice strong and clear in the night. The parchment began to smoke, its ink bleeding away like spilled water. The shadows shrieked, not in pain, but in rage, and rushed forward. Zaid stepped in front of Amina, his sword flashing in the moonlight, cutting through the dark shapes again and again, even as they reformed. The ground split open at the base of the grave, light pouring out like a flood. The hooded figure stepped back into it, her form growing faint. "You have done what I could not. Remember, truth is the sharpest blade. Wield it well." And then she was gone. The light vanished. The shadows fell still. Amina sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Zaid's hand rested gently on her shoulder. "It's over," he said quietly. The Imam looked at the now empty patch of earth. "For her, yes. But for those who committed the crime, the test is just beginning." The walk back from the graveyard felt different. Lighter somehow, though the night was still thick and cold. Amina glanced at Zaid, his steps steady beside hers. His sword hung loosely at his side now, no longer drawn, as if even the steel knew the battle was done. When they reached the Imam's quarters, he lit a small oil lamp and set it on the table. "The parchment is gone, the soul is free," he said. "But now comes the duty Allah commands. The truth must be spoken in the open, no matter how heavy it feels." Amina knew what he meant. Her uncle and Khalid could not be allowed to hide behind lies any longer. The next morning, they went to the Qadi's court. Amina stood before the people, her voice steady, recounting everything. Her mother's death, the theft, the haunting. She spoke not with bitterness, but with the clarity her mother had taught her. Justice is not revenge. Khalid was brought forward, his eyes hollow, his body trembling. Whatever the hooded figure had done to him that night had stripped away his arrogance. He confessed openly, unable to hide. The Qadi's judgment was swift, restitution to the family, and the punishment prescribed for betrayal and theft under Islamic law. No blood was spilled in vengeance. Instead, the law was carried out with fairness, just as Surah and Nisa commanded. When it was over, Amina stepped outside. The sunlight felt warmer than she remembered. Zaid joined her, leaning against the stone wall. "You were braver than I've ever seen anyone be," he said quietly. She smiled faintly. "I was terrified." "Bravery isn't the absence of fear," he replied. "It's standing firm while it shakes your bones." There was a pause. The city around them bustled with life. Market calls, children laughing, the clatter of carts. But for a moment, the world seemed small, just the two of them. "I'm leaving soon," Zaid said. "There are other roads that need walking, other wrongs to face." Amina felt a pang, but she nodded. "Then may Allah guide your steps." He smiled. "And may He guard yours." As he turned to go, Amina realized that some stories don't end with the monster's defeat or the hero's departure. Some end in the quiet knowing that truth was told, justice was served, and the living could walk without the weight of the dead pressing on their shoulders. That night, as she sat in her home, the moon high above, she whispered a prayer for her mother, and for herself. "O Allah, make me one who stands for truth, even against myself, and keep my heart free from the darkness of injustice." Outside, the wind carried no whispers now. The grave was quiet. The chains were broken.